Hello and welcome. My name is Sophia Siemer. I'm part of the events team of the Schwarzkopf Foundation, and I'm very pleased to be able to welcome you to our online talk with the title, Ending Female Genital Mutilation, a Global Fight for Basic Human Rights. I'm very excited to be able to welcome our speaker for tonight, Alya Harding. A very warm welcome to you, Alya. I can't see you right now. There she is. Hello. I would also like to introduce our moderator for tonight, Maria Attanasova. She is a Romani activist from Bulgaria. She's a midwife graduate and currently studying in a master's program in political science at the Central European University in Vienna. Her interests include minority rights, minority participation, social inequality, and intersectional feminism. She's also the Young European of the Year 2020, which is one of the things that she is connecting her with Alya, who was also one of the finalists for the Young European of the Year last year. Allow me to go on a little tiny detour before we start. The Young European of the Year is an award which is given to young Europeans between the ages of 18 and 26 who have demonstrated outstanding commitment to a peaceful, diverse, and inclusive Europe. If you, dear viewers, maybe know somebody who you think could follow the footsteps of these wonderful ladies, then you do have the chance to nominate someone for this year's European of the Year. You can do that by checking our website. The link is in the chat, and the nominations are still open until the 27th of February. So yeah, if you do know somebody, then use this chance to nominate them. Let's start with this, and I'm giving a very warm welcome to Maria as well. It's great to have you here. Before I hand over to you, I also want to give a few explanations about tonight's schedule. We will start by hearing a short input statement from Alya, after which Maria will start the conversation with questions from her side. And then later we will also open the questions for you and your, the round for you and your questions. So feel free to ask all of the questions and make comments. And yeah, we really very welcome questions from your sides. You can ask them in two ways, either in writing via the question and answer box, which should be visible down below, or via the raise your hand function. Here, Maria will call you by your name and give you permission to speak. This needs to be confirmed by you briefly, and then you can ask your question verbally. Please note and remember that this evening will be recorded and possibly published afterwards. So when you speak, just keep that in mind, or also when you write something. That's it from my side. Enough with all of the explanations. I'm handing over to Maria, and yeah, I'm wishing you all a great evening.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. Good. So I'm really happy to be your moderator today and this event. And it's really interesting. And to be honest, I'm personally also curious to see our guests and I'm looking forward to have our conversation. I'm happy to see many people that joined today with a curiosity as well to learn more about what is FGM, what are the FGM practices, and why there is a need for awareness. So let me welcome our guest today. Our expert is Alya Harding. She is a young activist from the UK, and she is also a youth ambassador for the End FGM European Network. I'm curious to know also more about the network. And Alya Harding is fighting in the community as well as the European Union level and international level to end FGM and for a world in which all women and girls feel empowered and their human rights respected. So warm welcome, Alya. Welcome to our webinar. So tell us more. Tell us more about yourself, firstly, if you want.
Thank you, Maria, for the introduction. I'm so glad to be joining you all this evening. So my name is Alya. I'm based in the UK. And yeah, I first was introduced to FGM when I was 18 years old, so while I was at university, and I wanted to learn more. I thought it was quite unsettling that the first time I learned about FGM was in a university space, so I kind of wanted to have a look at grassroots level and see what was going on. So yeah, I'm really glad to be sharing more with you. I guess I can get started if that's okay.
Yes, sure. Also, just let me remind to our viewers that you will have opportunity to ask questions. So have it in mind. So let's see what is FGM and why it needs awareness. Okay, go ahead, Alya. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Just please bear with me while I get my presentation up. Perfect. Can you see that? Okay. So yes, thank you so much for being here this evening in light of International Day of Zero Tolerance for FGM. So a bit of background about this year's theme. The United Nations is calling for accelerating investment in resources to end FGM, and it's calling out to civil organizations, governments, stakeholders, community members to really hone in, zone in, and to invest in ending FGM. And this can be through training, through legislation, through advocacy papers. So yeah, I'm really glad to be with you today. And I'm really glad to see that the foundation is also taking a step into investing into ending FGM. So I guess before I start, I wanted to get a sense of you know, if anyone has heard of FGM really. So if you'd like to raise your hands, if you've heard of FGM before, no worries if you haven't, that's totally fine. I can see some hands being raised. Great. Okay, so I can see a handful of you have heard of what FGM is. So thank you so much for raising your hands. And for those of you who have never heard of FGM, I hope that you leave today with a sense of what it's about and hopefully feel empowered enough to take action, even if it's just to bring awareness and share the word. Okay, great. So what is FGM? So FGM is female genital mutilation, and FGM can be referred to a circumcision or cutting, which involves the deliberate removal of the external female genitalia or partial removal of the female genitalia or any type of injury to the genitalia for non-medical reasons. FGM is usually practiced between the age of infancy to 15 years old. In some cases, young women are pressured into the practice, but we will explore, we'll go into that a bit later. FGM is a harmful practice, and FGM is a violation of human rights. Often when we hear about FGM, we hear that FGM is a violation of women and girls' rights, and I tend to not use that phrase only because that feeds into the notion that women are not acknowledged as human beings. You know, human rights, women's rights are human rights. So FGM is a violation of human rights, and that's how I like to go around raising awareness of it. And I guess as well, in more recent years, we are seeing that non-binary survivors are coming forward and saying, hey, I'm a survivor of FGM. What does women and girls mean for me? What does that mean for my experience? What does that mean for the type of resources that's available to me? So I think that's also important as well in us moving from it being violation of women and girls' rights into it's a violation of human rights, period. So there are 4 types of FGM. The first one is clitoridectomy, and this is where all or part of the clitoris or the hood is removed. And the second is excision, and this is where the clitoris and the inner labia minora, are removed. And then type 3 is infibulation, where the clitoris, inner and outer lips, labia minora and labia majora, are cut away and the remaining skin is sewn or sealed together to varying degrees. And type 4, this is a variety of practices, which includes the pricking, piercing, incision, stretching, scraping, or use of herbs and other substances for tightening. So on the next slide, I will be showing you some vulva models, types of FGM, which the End FGM European Network have put together. I am going to announce a trigger warning. So because it's going to show the types, but it's not actual visual or graphic representations of cases of FGM. They're more so models. But if you feel like you may be triggered by this, please take 5 minutes out, and then I would kindly ask for you to come back in, because I should have passed that slide by then. And of course, if you need extra support, Maria's here, and so is Sophia. So great, so these are the types. So we have type 1, and we can see here, so the dark purple circles is the removal. So type 1 is clitoridectomy, so it's the removal of the clitoris. And then we move on to type 2. So we can see also a purple dot here, which suggest a removal of the clitoris. This is not always the case, but majority of cases, the clitoris is removed. And the inner lips, and then we move on to type 3, which is infibulation. And what we can see here is the stitching all the way through from the urethra to where persons with a vulva urinate, and then down to the vaginal opening where persons with vulvas menstruate. You can see here that the stitch will go down and it leaves a tiny little hole the size of a matchstick. So that's how small the hole is. So you can imagine the blockage and the basically the blockage that's going on from the urine and menstruation flow coming through, which can cause a lot of difficulty and long-term impacts. And then type 4, of course, you've got the diagonal lines, which includes any other injuries to the vulva. And of course, if you'd like me to go over these, or you need more clarification, of course, during Q&A, I'm more than happy to answer any of your questions regarding the models. So, the United Nations estimates that 200 million girls have undergone FGM worldwide. Well, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for you based in, what does that mean for you, for those of you who are based in Germany? What does that mean for us who are based in Europe? What does that mean? So FGM is prevalent on every continent except for Antarctica. So yeah, 200 million girls and women worldwide have undergone FGM. 600,000 women are living with the consequences of FGM in Europe, and 137,000 women have undergone FGM in the UK. And these may seem like big statistics and wow data, but what does that really mean? So here I've put a statistic, or I guess a finding from a grassroots women's rights organization in Germany, and they've shared that almost 2,000 patients in Germany were diagnosed with FGM and in need of treatment, and this was in 2019. So what I'm trying to suggest here is that we've got all these big statistics worldwide, nationally, regionally, but all these data and all this work, all this research, all this reporting is really starting from grassroots. So yes, it's okay to move with these national data, UN data, global statistics. It's also important to consideration the work that is being done at grassroots level. And I guess on this point as well, we have to consider the issue of underreporting, especially when there's legislation against FGM, and how FGM is silenced and is going, and how the practice is being pushed underground through legislation. So I like to think of working with these statistics as an estimation, and think further, what does 200 million girls mean? And how can we work towards, ending a number that is so huge? So here are some international and regional frameworks. So we have the Istanbul Convention, which says FGM as a form of violence, which recognizes FGM as a form of violence against women. And then we have the Maputo Protocol, which is the Human Rights Charter for African people and women. And you can see this relation, African human rights and women. Why aren't women included in this human rights discourse? So that's something to think about as well. So the Istanbul Convention and the Maputo Protocol, they are both legally binding. So if member states or states ratify this and don't comply, there will be consequences. Unfortunately, for the declarations that follow, such as the EU Rights of the Child, the CEDAW Convention, and the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, these are frameworks and guidelines that are shaping work and shaping how we move to end FGM. So while they are not legally binding, they are super useful, and they tie into so many aspects of our European society, especially when we look into the context of globalization, migration, intermarriage, even like international students. So this is something that is useful to consider. And then so if I'm saying that FGM is a violation of human rights, if I'm saying it's a harmful practice, if there are all these regional and national and international frameworks that exist, why does it continue? Why are people carrying on the practice? So we have some main arguments here, and I'm sure as we work with more communities and we speak to more survivors, there's more reasons why, but here are some main arguments that I'd like to share with you. So the first one is family honor. So there's pressure from family members or community members to undergo the practice in the name of tradition. So you've got this dialogue of, oh, your grandmother has done it, your great grandmother has done it, your auntie's done it, your cousin's done it, me as your mother, I've done it, I as your mother have done it. So, you know, we need to carry on this tradition. And I think I mentioned earlier in saying that while the practice is predominantly performed between the ages of infancy and 15 years old, we do have young women such as 21 years old who are being forced to undergo the practice. And the most recent case is seen in Sierra Leone, where unfortunately the 21-year-old woman who undergone FGM unfortunately died. So we are seeing that while there's predominantly ages associated with FGM, you know, there is this pressure for young women who are uncut to undergo the practice. And this ties into ideas of what is a woman, who is a woman, what makes a woman, what is womanhood. So womanhood is a marker, and we have these across the globe. For example, in Latin America, you know, there's the quinceañera to, you know, seeing a woman, a girl would transition to a woman. For me in the UK and my peers, I know it's once we had our period, it was like, wow, you're a woman now, you know, you have to be serious, you have to grow up, you have to be more sensible. So there's still this sense of policing going on. So it's not to say that, you know, these sense of policing or ideas of womanhood are elsewhere. We all have our own ideas of what it means to be a woman, and this is one that influences the practice of FGM. There's also the notion of marriageability, and this is the assumption that uncut women are not worthy of being wives, and in some communities this ties into bride price. And then we have the notion of purity, which is the belief that uncut women are promiscuous and therefore they need to be tamed. Therefore, let's take away their clitoris because that's the only way they can receive pleasure, or that's where all their sexual desires coming from. But we know through sex education, we know through speaking with survivors that the clitoris is not the only way that persons with a vulva can experience sexual pleasure. So this is a myth. And then there's aesthetics, which is the idea that it looks pleasantly appealing, it looks cleaner and more attractive. And then we've got these mystified arguments. So some practicing communities believe that FGM promotes female hygiene. There are zero. There are no health benefits to FGM. And this is why in the beginning I put the italics on circumcision to suggest that there is no comparison. But we can go into that if that's something you'd like to discuss a bit later. And then we have the argument that we practice FGM in the name of religion. No holy book subscribes to FGM. It's not in the Torah, it's not in the Quran, it's not in the Bible. No holy book states FGM as a practice. And then we have the idea of culture. So over the years, we're seeing a shift, but it's still out there where FGM is referred to as a harmful cultural practice. But by using this term, we are suggesting that practicing communities don't want to see a change. And it also suggests that activists, survivors, community organizations who are working to end FGM, that their work is in vain. We are seeing communities' minds being changed. This is not to assume that some places have cultures and others don't. Cultures are constantly evolving and constantly changing. So it's also important to consider why we should move away from FGM being called a harmful cultural practice, or one that is in the name of tradition, because we know that traditional culture is not static. I mean, it's not stagnant. So yeah, I'll leave this with you for now. I hope you learned something new. And yeah, I guess back to you, Maria.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alya. I mean, thank you for enlightening us. What is the situation in Europe, and why actually this should be treated as a human right violation, and why we all should care about it. Okay, so I would like to ask you a couple of questions, and the first one that pops up in my mind is you mentioned survivals, and as this issue many times is seen as an African problem, or not consider that it's a problem in Europe as well. So could you, are you aware, firstly, you showed us the statistics, what is the situation exactly in Europe? And are you aware what kind of support could actually countries offer to survivors of FGM practices?
No, thank you for your questions. And I guess I've picked up two aspects of it. So the survivor notion and it being an African issue. And then the other one, like what can EU countries in Europe do to help survivors? So I guess answering the first half of the question is, when we use the word survivor instead of victim, this is to highlight the fact that women or people who undergo FGM, they are contributing people of society, that FGM doesn't mean the end. FGM is a harmful practice that has been happened to them. It's a form of violence that's happened to them, but they go on to live their lives. They go on to become our teachers. They go on to become our mothers, our aunties. They go on to be contributing people in society. And also, when we consider Europe and globalization and migration, we have to consider that move away from the racialization of bodies and recognize them that, you know, these are people living in our community. They are trying to live their lives. What can we do to support them? So leading on to the second point is, I think we need to start acknowledging the psychological violence that happens when people experience FGM. It's tragic, and PTSD is a known consequence of FGM, and this can be triggered in many ways. So what I would suggest is that we start thinking about FGM, talking about FGM is not something that's happened, but something that people continue to live with. Some survivors refer to it as a life sentence, not a death sentence, a life sentence, and how FGM continues to inform their lives and the way they maneuver in society. So I think that it's very important that countries in Europe understand that it's not something that's happened, it's something that continues to influence. So acknowledging that they need counseling support, they need resources, doctors need training, midwives need training, therapists needs training. So there needs to be consideration of the psychological violence, definitely.
Thank you. That was going to be my second question regarding the psychological and sexual and reproductive implications of the FGM practices. And you already mentioned the psychological ones, but as far as I'm aware, there are also many complications that could be developed, and that is something that should be also considered. And you also mentioned earlier about the case of a woman that just died. So still, why? I know that many people in Europe still could not even process the implications. And you were talking about how actually these women survivors of FGM practice, they live with these implications. And that's only just one of the reasons why we have to be aware in order many women to easily open and talk about it. What are your observations? What do you think? How is it our society open enough and to make women comfortable to report this? And what is the procedure and how people proceed when there is somebody that wants to report FGM practices?
So I would definitely start by saying that I do believe in the legislation like prohibiting FGM. I do believe there needs to be a legal consequence for those who practice, because it is a form of torture and it is a form of violence and it's a denial of human rights. But on the other hand, legislation is not the answer. Legislation leads to underreporting, it leads to criminalizing, especially when we consider the extent of racialization and Islamophobia in Europe. I'm sorry to say, but we need to we need to understand that that then there needs to be more than legislation, that this criminalizing, that it's this other, it's only these type of people who do it. So yeah, there needs to be more work with communities. There needs to be more work with community more community engagement. And you find that as well at European level. And that's why I really enjoy my time under the European Network, because I get to work with so many other young people and survivors across Europe that I would have never met, because I still feel like we are stuck in a time when, although the United Nations is asking us to reimagine a world where young women and girls have voices, as they've put in their call for this year's theme. First of all, young women and girls have voices, so that's one thing. But also, I think it's about time that we start moving away from this reimagining and acknowledging that survivors know what's best for them. Why aren't we speaking to them? So we're seeing these patterns of still imposing, we know what's best for you, this is how we do things, but you can't assume that once people travel that they leave their cultures or traditions or practices or beliefs at the border. There can no longer be this assumption. So community engagement is key. And like I mentioned earlier, the work at grassroots is really what's providing the data at global level. If it wasn't for community organizations, how would this be possible for us to have these statistics? And even in my experience as a youth ambassador, for the UK under the End FGM European Network, I was brought to the European network through a community organisation. So the knowledge I'm bringing with me to European level is really what I've learned at grassroots level, and all the courageous and resilient women who are constantly fighting this battle every day, not only when it comes up on February 6th February 6th, that's not the only fight they have. It's a continuous battle. So I think there needs to be a recognition for that as well.
I absolutely agree with you that there should be a continuous recognition. There is a question for you from our viewers. So Emma asks, so her question and comment is the following. I work in a primary and secondary school. How can I recognize if a child is at a danger of FGM, and what should my steps be in providing support, and with which organization? So how and what actually educators, teachers could do? What could be done in this situation? Yeah, that could be very helpful. We could answer to that. Thank you, Emma, for the question.
Yeah, Emma, great question. And thank you for bringing it up, because it's such an important one. So first of all, I would say that in sex education, as educators, as teachers, we need to move away from this heterosexist focus of sex and what sex means and what pleasure means. How many of us can name the vulva? Honestly, how many of us can name the vulva? But we know the penis. We're taught how to put a condom on the penis during sex ed, but there's no emphasis around the vulva. So this is one inclusive step that you can take. Do persons with vulvas know their bodies? All they are told is that about STIs, focus on STIs, focus on their fertility. That's literally it. But we're missing this notion of my body, my rights completely. And persons with people with vulvas, persons with vulvas, they don't know their bodies. They don't know their bodies, and this is an issue then when it comes, if a young person has undergone FGM, how do you explain what's happened to you if you don't know the female genitalia? If you don't know your body, how can you explain that and articulate that? And I guess then the second point would be that do not assume. And this leads to the point I made earlier about the criminalization and how this leads to underreporting and it not being necessarily the only answer. Just because a mother has been cut, or just because a mother has undergone FGM, do not take that as a stance to assume or act that their child is cut. That is the wrong way to go about it. I would say there's a few signs that you could watch out for. So there are periods referred to as cutting seasons, and this is when a young girl can be taken away to her family's country of origin to undergo FGM. So that's only one. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there's so many things to consider in order to create a bigger picture. Don't react or assume on one idea. I guess a second one would be if they are bleeding, like drastically bleeding, or they can't participate in any physical activities, if they're spending long times in the toilets, if for example, I mentioned about the womanhood and the celebration. It is a big celebration. These FGM involves, in some communities, is like they're giving gifts. there's food, it's a big party. So they don't really understand what's going on. So if you hear your students saying, you know, oh, I'm really excited. Like, I'm gonna be, yeah, I'm gonna have this big party and I'm gonna get all these gifts. But like I'm saying, these are only puzzles of the broader picture. So do be mindful of not acting on one. And then I guess, I'm so sorry, I don't know if I'll be able to answer the final aspect of the question, which is what support is available, because I'm based in the UK. I know that, so this depends where you are in Europe, but I would suggest going to your safeguarding lead. I don't know if Maria, is that something that everyone is aware of, a safeguarding lead?
Maybe you can clarify shortly about that as well. That would
Sure.
be.
So a safeguarding lead in your school or in your educational setting would be someone who ensures the well-being of your students. So they may not necessarily like be a professional in a subject or like teach English or German or maths or science, but they have an office and they are known for the person who ensures the well-being of students. So they may suggest to teachers and be like, look, this is coming up as an issue. We need to talk about this. Or in sex education, they shape the curriculum. So those would be the people you'd go to. What do we have in place for FGM? And if there isn't anything in place, which is most likely the case, why isn't there anything in place? I would suggest when you are looking for resources, when you are looking for information, don't stop at the internet. Check what community organizations are offering support. I'm telling you now that community organizations are the most hardworking and the most underpaid. So invest in the people, like I said, who are continuously doing the work every day. So because they're doing great work. And I've mentioned this before, and I'll mention it again. They are shaping the statistics at the global level. So see what resources they are offering in your schools. For where I'm based in the UK, Forward UK. Forward UK can type that in if anyone's from either the UK on this call. They offer school sessions. They will train teachers, they will train staff. And this is not to say only teachers in the classroom. This involves staffs, dinner ladies, staff on the playground. Everyone needs to be involved. They have a duty to safeguard. And then also they do school sessions for students from primary school to secondary school. And it's really around the same notion of my body, my rights, no harm should be done to my body. And then with the ages, as the ages increase, it gets more in depth. But yeah, very good question, Emma, thank you.
I guess it differs from country to country with the opportunities, but I guess in general, raising awareness about it and maybe will make people more comfortable to talk and share and look for support. I see that there is a hand raised. So yeah, I see Deborah. So I will open your microphone. So you need to confirm and you can ask your question.
Yes, first of all, thank you for the interesting input. I recently read a text by Fuambi Amadou, who is a Sierra Leone anthropologist, and she has a feminist vision that I don't share, but she addresses a central issue. Often not the survivors of FGM themselves criticize this issue, but Westerners who are not personally affected at all. And what my question is, what can be done to encourage those survivors and to end silence?
Thank you, Deborah. Sorry, could you just repeat the question again, or maybe type it into the chat? I think I only caught half of the question.
If she can repeat.
Oh,
go ahead. Sure, we are listening.
Okay, I said, what can be done to encourage those survivors and to end silence?
To a silence or to end silence? Sorry.
To end silence. If I'm not mistaken, what could be done to to encourage and to end to share more and to end silence in that. Yeah.
Thank you, Deborah, for sharing that. I'm a Sierra Leonean, so thank you for sharing that data. That's really interesting. I'd love to, if you could share what you've written on that, that would be really interesting for me to read. So one thing I would say that we all need to do is we need to stop treating FGM as a standalone issue. So FGM continues to be treated as an African issue, like, or an issue of Muslim communities, like you raised earlier, Maria. Like, how can we move away from talking about it as an issue that happens over there? And I think one way that we can do that is to understand that FGM interlinks with so many aspects of the violation of human rights, of the denial of human rights. So, for example, if you call yourself a feminist, if you are against patriarchy, why aren't you speaking about FGM? This is a denial of human rights. And I guess to move away from feminism, but to just say human rights in general, if you believe that all people deserve human rights, so why aren't you speaking about this? This is a violent act. This is not a passive act of violence, even though passive acts of violence are legitimate as well and we should take seriously. This is a forceful act. This is an act, trigger warning, that involves pinning down, a forceful pinning down, use of unsterilized instruments such as scissors and blades to cause harm. Why aren't we speaking about this? And then I guess another aspect is, if you believe that all young people have rights to education, why aren't you speaking about FGM? FGM, when I spoke about the reasons why it's practiced and why it continues to happen, is the idea of womanhood. So if you are cut at the age of 14, it's like, you're a woman now, you can get married, you can have children, and this stops young people from completing the education or going on to live fulfilling lives. Let me backtrack, not to say they don't go on to live fulfilling lives, but this does create barriers in the type of resources or options that are available to them. So I think it's about thinking, how can we interlink FGM for what it really is and not speak about it as a standalone issue? And then I guess another one, to bring in men, because men have a role to play as well. So if you are a man and you're thinking, oh, this is a bit taboo, I don't really know how to talk about, a vulva, a vagina, don't really know how to speak to women or non-binary survivors, how do I get involved? Again, you could use the human rights argument, of course, but also, I guess, going back to Maria, when you were talking about the health implications, FGM survivors, some of them experience sexual dysfunction. So if you believe in sexual pleasure of women, if you believe in the autonomy over women's bodies, why aren't you speaking about FGM? So here, just opening up the dialogue, I think would get it would help survivors open up more, because often they don't know how to relate. They feel like, if I speak about this, how does this relate to the dominant discourse of human rights? How does this relate to the dominant discourse of mental health, which has been, I guess, come up in the past 2 years because of the pandemic? How do I situate myself within that? So that's important, to open up dialogue.
I absolutely agree with your points, and I think that these are very important points to be considered. There are a couple more questions from our participants, and so one of them is anonymous. So since this is something happening to very young girls, do you believe that there are a lot of survivors who do not realize that that was happening to them as a violation, actually? That's a very good question, I think.
Yeah, a very good question. Thank you for whoever asked. So unfortunately, a lot of FGM survivors don't know they have been cut until their first sexual encounter, whether it's personal or sharing it with someone, or until their first pregnancy. And this is why we need to open up dialogue. So thank you for whoever asked that question about how we can, yeah, I think it was Deborah who mentioned that. Yeah, so this is an issue that we have, that young people don't know what's happened. Survivors, sorry, don't know what's happened to them. And yes, they don't know it's a violation of human rights. And this is because of the secrecy of the practice. FGM is not something that you announce to the world. FGM is something that resides within communities. And it's something that if you are within a practicing community, it's something that everyone has kind of experienced, so you think it's the norm. So yeah, that's such an interesting question, and there's so much work to do around that. And I think it links to what I believe what Emma was asking about. How can we as educators like identify this? We need this, there's so much work to be done before before we look at FGM as just treating as a harmful practice, basically. Like, how do we speak about FGM in educational settings? How can we really raise awareness about this so that survivors know what has happened to them? So yeah, we do have this issue where a lot of survivors don't know they have been being cut until later. And I guess with this knowledge, how does this shape how we go about ending FGM or supporting survivors of FGM? This means, more investment, more emphasis on training. Professionals need to be trained on this subject matter, so they know that if we know that that survivors are only learning about themselves during their first sexual encounter or during their first pregnancy, why isn't there adequate training for midwives? Why are midwives alarmed or are unsure or going to a panic when they are dealing with a survivor? This is life we're talking about here. There needs to be more training. There needs to be more emphasis of it needs to be a public issue. And I think this also ties into the notion of women moving and living in the private, and it never, what they do and what happens in the private never affects the public. But these spheres, they interconnect, they interlink. And so we need to see how women are operating in this public. And only when we do understand that, then we will put emphasis on training and more resources in public spaces. And I guess this links to what we were saying before, what we were discussing before about FGM, why FGM, how we can open up FGM dialogue. There's so many ways it interlinks. Like right now I'm talking about public versus private, which some of you would associate with economy. Yeah, FGM has everything to do, FGM has economic value. It really does. bride price. We're talking about exchange of cattle. We're talking about the value of women. Like it interlinks with so many different things, and only when we realize this can we truly, truly, truly take steps to ending FGM.
Yeah, and in that relation, I guess many people are wondering for more practical suggestions. And thank you, Helena, for your comment and question. So I will read it. Thank you for your input. I work in medicine, and I'm wondering how I can create an atmosphere in which survivors feel comfortable and safe to tell me about this.
I wanted to ask, are you a student? Are you an educator? That would, or I can give suggestions for both.
I'm not sure if she said that she's working, I guess, in the medical field, but also I do have a training as a midwife, and to be honest, I mean, I'm coming from Eastern Europe, and I've never been trained how actually to work and how to approach a woman if she's undergone through FGM practices. I learned about FGM practices in my activism, actually, and being sensitive about feminism, about human rights, and many other social and human rights topics, actually. So I think I think that would be useful if you have more practical implications. Okay, so she clarified that she studies medicine right now, but also works in the field. But yeah, I guess it's still valid because, as I mentioned, in certain parts of the world, people actually who study to work in the medical field, they don't heard about these practices at all.
Thank you for your question. I would suggest that if it's something if there's no dialogue of FGM in your educational setting, take a stand. Don't wait for someone to take that stand for you, especially when you know what is wrong. If you know something is wrong, it's wrong, speak up about it. And this can be difficult, but this can be, like we've discussed throughout this call, is how can you open up dialogue? How can you link it to other topics that are being discussed in the the field of medicine? So I personally have no background knowledge on like what happens in the medical field or what you're taught necessarily, but I would suggest that if you're talking about reproductive health or contraception, find ways to talk about FGM. If you're part of a extracurricular club that champions reproductive health rights, maybe suggest to the committee or your peers, I think we should, invite a community organization or community member or survivor to speak about FGM. Just start taking steps to speaking about it. I think we're doing a disservice when we know and we don't speak up, because I feel like a lot of people are FGM, and this is not to take away from FGM being a sensitive issue. It is a sensitive issue, but it's not sensitive enough for you, for us, to keep silent about it. So I think that's the difference.
Yeah, if I may continue that, because I mean, it's interesting that many medical workers actually are not trained enough and they're not aware. And I have a medical background, and also as an activist, to the question that Helena raised. I might say that you just mentioned the grassroots communities, and different non-governmental organizations, for instance, if you see that there is no anyone who talks about it or any action, I guess, I mean, here my as an activist, I would say that you can approach different non-governmental organizations that work in the field of human rights, and maybe cooperate with them, or maybe give them a feedback that is missing in your country, in your city. And especially even it could be a project, it could be an idea actually, human rights organizations to train or to inform in a way, to cooperate with medical universities and institutes and hospitals. Why not? I mean, we should find every way of informing people and raising awareness about it. Okay, so we are slowly but surely, so I mean more soon, we are approaching the end. So I do have one last question, Alya, and I know the topic is very sensitive, and we talked about what could be done, why we should act upon that. But I want to ask you, what is the world that you envision regarding FGM practices, women and girls, and people who survived FGM practices?
Thank you, Maria. So just before I answer the question, I've just put the End FGM European Network in the chat box because I feel like I'm kind of doing a disservice in not knowing countries' specific situations, because I'm not aware of like where you are right now in Europe, but the European network have great resources for you to check in on what's happening in your country, and you can always get in touch with them because they are an organization with 30 member organizations across Europe, so they could possibly connect you with someone on the ground in the country where you're at. So just thought I'd quickly add that in there before we close. And then answering your question, sorry, Maria, please may you repeat your question? I've forgotten it in answering that.
It's okay, of course. Thank you for contributing and putting the link. Maybe that would be useful to the people. So my question was, how do you envision the world regarding FGM practices, women and girls, and people who survive these practices? What you wish for as an activist about it?
Thank you for repeating that. So I would say that one, I think we've mentioned it about like FGM not being a standalone issue. I'd love to see dialogue being opened up around this subject. And I guess as well, just drawing on, because as we do as activists, as much as we champion grassroots work, we are an international community. We need to work together. So I guess looking at the UN's call to end FGM for 2030, this gives me hope that we are the generation. We are the generation to end FGM. So I really appreciate all your questions, because I don't even see them as questions. I see them as calls to action, you know. So I really appreciate how all of you on this call, even just by being here, it means that you want to learn more, you want to do more. So just continue to take up space, continue to see how you can speak about FGM in broader conversations. And yeah, like young people, we have so much power, we have so much voice. And I don't even like this notion of young people are the future of tomorrow. No. Or young people, or I'm sorry, young people are the leaders of the future, or young people are the leaders of tomorrow. No, we are the leaders right now. Look at Maria, like she's here, she's doing her thing. She's a young European. Young European. Yeah,
you as well. The fact that you're here and you're educating us about these topics, so I think that speaks for itself. And I guess I absolutely agree with you that we are we are here and we should do something. When you learn about something and this is an issue, this is a problem, you should do about it something.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, I agree. And never silence yourself. Don't silence yourself. If you know something is wrong, speak up. Your voice carries power. You as a young person, you hold such a unique position in society. You're literally like in between worlds. So yeah, definitely value your position, value what you have to say, and value your contribution as a member of Europe, of the European society and the world we're trying to build together.
Absolutely, I would say that every small action matters in that sense, and yeah, we are able to raise more awareness and to help together as a society. So thank you very much, Alya, for this contribution, and it was lovely to speak to you. So I would hand over to Sophia, and thank you to our participants as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maria, for this great moderation. Thank you, obviously, to you, Alya, for all of these information and also for your passion. And I think it was a really inspiring talk and super informative. I do hope that all of our viewers will take something of today home with them. I definitely know that I will think about it a lot. And yeah, I also want to thank obviously our wonderful audience for all of the great questions that you asked, and for being here and being interested in this topic. So yeah, thank you to you all. I do want to use this moment to also recommend to our viewers to maybe follow us on social media or follow our newsletter to not miss great events like this one in the future. I would also like to really briefly tell you about our next event. It will be happening on the 23rd of February at 6 p.m. It will take place in German, so I will tell you the German title. Our guest will be Terry Reintke, who is a member of the European Parliament, and she will talk on the topic of freie Räume versus Freiheitsräume, der Kampf für LGBTIQ-Rechte in der EU. Yeah, I hope to maybe see some of you there, or if not, see you at some point in the near future. I hope you all stay healthy. And yeah, another thank you to Maria and to Alya. It was really great listening to you two. And yeah, I'm going to end this call for today and wish you all a great evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.